live! Yay!
Hello, everyone. I know this is going to be a little bit different than usual.
But I think it's going to be fun. Yes. In reality, when this shows on YouTube, we will be on our way to Chicago. To go hang out with other lovely author tubers.
Hopefully, having a fun time at our little mini convention.
Yes.
I have to say, as far as today's subject goes, there was definitely a lot of surprises for me on the rewatch now that I know more context. And just in general, I have more access to info on the internet. Since, I was not of the age to watch it when it came out. But it was a lot more fascinating than I was expecting of the influence that Ralph Bakshi had on everyone. Like, I just thought he was this weird little animator who managed to make, a couple of interesting, if, oddball animated movies. And now rewatching it, it's like, wait, but then I would see the same stuff come up a decade later in so many other animations. Like, none of this showed up beforehand, but some of it showed up later. And then finding out why. But like, Ralph Bakshi is definitely one of those unacknowledged creators, but kind of like in the vein of The Searchers, where a lot of directors reference this movie because it influences the way they want to do storytelling.
Yes.
And Ralph definitely influenced a lot of animators in how to tell animated stories, visually and story-wise and character-wise, and what... Hello, Maggie.
Hi.
And I was not expecting to just see so much influence of, like, I think the animated world would be very different now without Ralph Bakshi. Which is not what I thought of when I even thought about originally talking about Ralph, a few months ago.
I knew Ralph Bakshi was influential, culturally speaking, because of the video store. Because I had so many men of a certain age ask if we could find VHS and later DVD copies of various Ralph Bakshi films that were difficult to source.
I mean, they still are.
Yeah, they are. So I had an inkling, and honestly, every time I was able to get a copy, the first time I was able to get a copy of any of his movies, I'd always take it home first and watch it before I would then sell it to the customer who requested it. So, it was much easier to get 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat, which Bakshi was not involved in, versus Fritz the Cat. It also, Wizards was very difficult. Like, trying to find, because they were like, look, I'll take bootleg. And I'm like, look, if I can find you bootleg, I'll get you some bootleg. But, sourcing these was a real challenge. And it was only through that, and so watching those, that I had any inkling, because Ralph Bakshi's films are surprisingly difficult to source.
Yeah.
Like, you'd think it was the, lost gold of the Sierra Madre. It's so hard. And I thought by the time the 21st century, it would get easier. And it's not easier.
You can't even purchase for streaming on Amazon Prime most of his movies.
Yes.
which I'm
And
really surprised at.
it's kind of wild that he is still essentially like such an underground artist, even, with the nature of the dark web. It's kind of interesting. But
Yeah.
so like doing this, and honestly, why did we do this? Because in 2008, I got access to Twitter. I got in on the last beta, and Ralph Bakshi was on there, and
He still is.
he would actually respond to people who are like, "Hey, you're like the movies of my child," and he's like, "Cool, weird, but cool," because Ralph Bakshi has never really made films for children, with the possible exception of Wizards and I guess technically Cool World,
I was
because
gonna say,
because
technically, Cool World was
yeah,
PG-13 and marketed at high school and middle school.
yeah. So I guess that one. Um, but nevertheless, he would actually respond, and people are like, "It's so cool. He's such a real person. He's not like one of those with like paid social media account
Or,
managers."
but also not with like a super ego about the work of, everyone should be so privileged that they can see my stuff. And
Right, like, I remember people would complain about, "Why does Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings look so good in spots and so cheap in spots?" And he would just, like, respond.
yeah.
Like, they didn't tag him, but, they did not tag him.
Mm-hmm.
And so, he'd actually respond like, "Hey,
Well, he has
man."
a pretty unique last name, so I'm
Right,
sure he
yeah.
just had a, if Bakshi comes up, let me
I think
know.
the only other people Bakshi on Twitter were his sons, like, it just
Yeah.
but yeah, he would respond, "Hey, man, financing is a real problem for animators," you know? And like but he was also understanding of, yeah, you're right. Some of it looks cheap as hell. Like he was just very down to earth and practical. And
Yeah.
that is honestly where I actually started gaining a respect for him versus just knowing that. Let's see. So when I was running the video store, I was in my early 20s, like very early. And so, yeah, these were men who were coming in who were in their mid 40s to late 50s. So they were all 20 to 30 years older than me. And they always wanted Fritz the Cat. Oh man, I had them offer me hundreds of dollars if I could find a copy of Coonskin.
Yeah.
And
Like they
I
would
was
pull their
never.
money if we could find a copy.
Oh yeah. Oh they would. And they like I just could not source a copy of Coonskin. Um and even the bootleggers we knew were struggling to source a copy of Coonskin.
Mm-hmm.
And like Heavy Traffic, I think, was also like it impossibly difficult
Mm-hmm.
to source. But and nobody was really that interested in American pop. But
Which we now understand why.
yeah, we understand why. But also people were interested in Wizards. And but it was always like, again, it was just people who are older than me, much older. Like when I was at 21, men in their 50s like seemed ancient. I know that they're not actually now, But I mean, at the time, they just seemed like a world away from me.
So
And
honest.
and I'm just being honest about it. And also that it wasn't just like white men or black men. It was everybody.
Yeah.
I had guys coming in who were literally just on work visas from other countries who are like, "Can you get Ralph Bakshi?" And
I
we
heard
heard
it's like I heard you can get a lot of hard to find movies.
right, which was true because I knew bootleggers as well as mainstream distributors, and I was, work friends with them all. Like we just would chat because I've always been a
And
storyteller.
even I don't know what you would call I don't remember what they were really called, but like remember the guy in New York or was it Florida who like technically had publishing rights for these, not exclusive, but he could essentially make legal copies of hard to find films for for really not that much comparatively at the
So I
time.
know what you're talking of, and he originally was in Connecticut, and in the time period that we had the video store, he moved to Florida. He retired to Florida, but he took all his stuff with him. I'm like, is it really a retirement? But anyway, because I was like, you're going to Florida. And he's like, yeah, I'm moving to Florida. So, I might be out of pocket for a month or two while I move. And I'm like, but we won't be able to get the movies anymore. And he's like, oh no, my daughter told me I have to take all my stuff. I can't leave the master. So I'm moving it all down, but it's going to take me a couple drives to move it all down. And so that was like, it was like, okay, how long is that going to take for you to essentially get reset up in Florida?
Yeah.
But that was, that guy, because he was able to he had masters of a bunch of school films, hygiene stuff, weird stuff. He had masters to a lot of these, in part because he used to be a high school English teacher. And essentially that school in Connecticut was closing, and they had master copies because, they actually had an AV department. So they'd make masters for the other schools in Connecticut, because Connecticut is very small. And the only one smaller is Delaware. Anyway, so, and he was like, hey, I'll just take it all. So he just took them home.
But I mean, but he found out he had already learned how do you keep it licensed? How do you not have to deal with,
Oh yeah,
all that? And so he was able to make legal copies, unlike most of them, of just these incredibly hard to find weird stuff. And then he would also just collect as other people, would also just go out of business, or they too would retire.
And they would just give him their masters. So he was inheriting all these master films.
Yeah.
Master copies of these films. So he was able to get us. It took him several years for him to hunt down a copy of Fritz the Cat that he could copy.
Yeah.
That took him, I know it took him at least 18 months, if not actually longer. I think it may, he thought it would only take, and it actually took him almost 2 years.
I say he had to call 20 different locations of
because
suppliers.
there was problems with the American distribution of it. As I have learned, there was problems with the American distribution for VHS and DVD of most of Bakshi's, even though he mostly worked out of Paramount, which is kind of wild to me. But part of that is because, so apparently, I guess when Paramount was like, this is too hot, we don't want to distribute this, like Coonskin, they went with this other company to distribute it. And then 2 weeks after they got the contract, they went out of business. They bankrupted. And therein lies a lot of the problems. He was at a weird name like Bryanston Films Distribution or something. Anyway, but yeah, so that is how I got exposed to Bakshi. But again, I had such high respect for him because of the way he interacts on Twitter as a real person rather than as a brand. And so many men, including my ex-husband, were into Bakshi because of his Lord of the Rings, his animated Lord of the Rings, and also the animated Return of the King and Hobbit from Rankin Bass. And since some of the animation departments were the same, people would get confused about which one he did, which he was like, that was his objection, actually, which is understandable. But he would interact with everybody. And that's where I gained respect for him. And that was honestly one of the ideas I had for this. I had no idea what I was getting into. with these films.
Yeah.
Maggie says there were so many other amazing Bakshi films. Agreed. Fire and Ice and Lord of the Rings both allegedly had animation done over film. Yeah, rotoscoping. Actually, Bakshi did rotoscoping on a lot of them. So, yes, Lord of the Rings, American Pop, Fire and Ice, as well as Cool World. They all had rotoscoping. And that definitely influenced movies like A Scanner Darkly, choosing to rotoscope as well.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people saw the rotoscoping in Lord of the Rings and were heavily influenced to explore rotoscoping. The
And
problem
then,
with rotoscoping is it's so crazy. Up until recently, it was so crazy expensive.
oh, there is so much insanity that was Cool World.
Yes. Yes, Tom and I watched it yesterday again, like for the first time in, I don't know, a decade or two.
Yeah.
And it was wild. It was wild.
I mean, it was definitely, it's one of those too many cooks in the kitchen problem.
Exactly, Maggie. That is the issue with rotoscoping, as I understand it, is always you're filming the film twice. And animation is expensive anyway. And then to film it first and then animate over it, that is expensive. Also, it's painstaking. It takes time, in part because there's only one copy of each cell. So you can't divide it up like you do with traditional animation. Now, just in the last 10 years, rotoscoping has dramatically changed because the technology has finally caught up. And rotoscoping is no longer the wildly, inappropriately expensive technology that it once was. So we are seeing more rotoscope now, but it is not prohibitively expensive like it was for, I don't know, 40
But
years.
as we've learned, pretty much any cartoon where you see very lifelike human motion,
Mm-hmm.
there is some degree of rotoscoping involved. So all, especially early golden age Disney cartoons, involved rotoscoping to some degree, where they
Oh, yeah.
actually had the actors act out all those scenes and then would draw them into their frames, but they didn't do like just direct paint over. They would then, transfer it over with the multiplanar camera that Disney used.
So, for instance, when you see Sleeping Beauty dancing in the woods with the cloak, that is, they recorded that first, and the movement is cell for cell a copy of the actress's movement.
Even The Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
A lot of those scenes with her on land, but as well as like the infamous scene of her coming out of the water doing the hair flip.
Mm-hmm.
There is actual film of the actress who did the motions and all that for it. But essentially, before mocap,
Mm-hmm.
there was, to some degree, rotoscoping.
Yes.
Because that was the only way to really get that smooth motion. But, but you see how much it made Disney famous. You see how much people
So
are attracted to it.
there's a trade-off. With rotoscoping, you get the movement is realistic. So the gross motor movement is very realistic. It feels real. It feels authentic.
Everything has weight.
But everything is gravity. But what you lose is subtlety of facial expression. And it is frustrating for animators. But because the way they used to rotoscope, they didn't just, hey, we'll just paint over it with it and put in expression until Cool World. That's literally the film where they're like, you know what? Let's just have a good time. Let's just give her expression that normally gets covered up with the paint of the rotoscoping technique. And then they did that. And things really started changing at that point. So, one of the things I realized watching these films is how very influential Bakshi has been to literal generations of animators, as well as to other storytellers. And like whole areas of animation you can just see his footprint in. Like I was telling Tom, I finally finished watching Wizards last night. Seriously, the first 20 minutes of that voiceover, it's just, that is a cure for insomnia. But once I got through the voiceover intro, I was like, why is this movie from the 70s look like, cheap 80s kids cartoons? It reminds me of, My Little Pony, the original one that the internet doesn't want to admit exists. And glowworms, again, something the internet doesn't want to admit exists. And why does it feel like, why does Bakshi's Wizards feel like those 80s cartoons that were trying to sell toys? And the answer is because they copied him. He did it first.
Well, not only that, but the other thing Bakshi did, which is so different than a lot of the other ones, is Bakshi never really made a big studio. Bakshi tended to make, sort of for hire work projects and then would collect the people. So what he did instead was he trained animators and storytellers in animation how to do all this and then sent them out because he's like, I can't give you a career here. So if other people offer you a better one, go take it. And so it's another way his influence spread.
And he just trained. He trained a ton of animators over 20, 30 years.
But
good Lord.
But if you watch his films from the 70s and 80s, you will start going, wait a minute. Why does Tiny Toons look like this? Why does Batman the Animated Series have scenes like this?
Yeah.
Or at least, and it's because he was training all these animators who then went on to all these other projects.
Let alone Mighty Mouse, the 80s Mighty Mouse, where he trained a bunch of Pixar people who would eventually go on to Pixar to direct films. He would train, pretty much influenced almost all of Nickelodeon animation for 20 years.
And Fox Animation.
But if I remember correctly, what I've read, people who worked with him and who were heavily influenced by him includes the guy who did Rocko's Modern Life. Yes, the people who did Rugrats, who did the animation for it. Everybody wanted to work with him, and he tried his best to make opportunities for people to work with him.
You want to answer that one?
Sure.
Cool World and Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Cool World was literally, Bakshi saw Who Framed Roger Rabbit and was like, oh, the world is finally ready for this cool, and pitched essentially Who Framed Roger Rabbit as a horror film for adults to the Paramount head of Paramount, who was literally within a sentence or two was like, you're greenlit, let's sign now. That is how fast he got greenlit for it.
And what he did was he took the elements, now that the audience was there for, from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, he then introduced Jewish storytelling styles. He introduced the elements from people of color and once in non-mainstream society and culture.
Also,
that's why you also brought in Tex Avery style cartoons
and Fleischer's
and Fleischer,
and all of Terry Toons, which is where Bakshi trained when he was young. He worked his first animation, or real animation job, was at Terry Toons in Brooklyn.
And so it is sort of a conversation piece to Who Framed Roger Rabbit of here's all the stuff you missed.
Yeah.
One of the things you'll really notice in all Bakshi films, at least, as much influence as he has, because Cool World, he definitely got, the studio stepped in a lot of places where it shouldn't.
Well, the first assignment was the head of Paramount assigned his son to be the head producer, and it went downhill from there, as you might expect.
But like one of the things you will always notice in a Bakshi film that I feel like is a hallmark is,
well, not always.
but it is not a white wonderland. There will always be people of color, and women are not set dressing.
In theory, as said, Frank Franzetta was a bad influence on Bakshi.
But even there, the mother and even the other witch that died, that was killed by in Fire and Ice, you know, that
yes.
they both, you know, have a lot of speaking roles. They both have a lot of agency, like,
you know, till they're killed. Anyway.
Yeah. But just he's the one who brought in this of where, why do you divide up this stuff between men and women or between people of color and white society? Why do you keep making these divisions? There is no divisions in real life.
Opening up the locales for animation. You know, the backgrounds. That was also something that Ralph Bakshi was really, he's just, so with animation, there was this tendency to set, I don't know if you noticed this, there's this tendency to set animation, particularly by Disney, but also Warner Brothers, to set it in the country or the countryside or more rural locales. Now, Max Fleischer cartoons and to some degree Terry Toons did set it in urban settings. But again, you've got this Jewish versus Gentile thing happening.
We've got some ads.
Okay. But you've got this Jewish versus Gentile setting. The Gentiles are in the country. The Jewish immigrants are in the urban areas. As are most immigrants. Most immigrants have to go where the work is. And most of the work that pays a living wage, you're going to find in the big city.
Yeah. And the other thing, like, I haven't had time, I didn't really have a chance to do research. Like, as y'all know, we've been very busy the past week, especially, but even the weeks before that, there's been a lot of planning for us for the upcoming week. So I wasn't able to do a lot of research, but I did start to wonder, watching a lot of Bakshi's work, of how much influence did it actually have on Japan's anime storytelling towards an adult audience, and just more mature themes and storytelling through animation that I really mostly see more after Bakshi's 70s work of, I mean, between Coonskin and Heavy Traffic. They are both showing how you can use animation, especially in an urban setting, to discuss and critique society with visuals you couldn't do on a budget in live action. And I then see them later in the 80s popping up in anime movies where you see this similar critique of society. And these are animations, but these are not for children at all. Movies start showing up. And so, like, I don't know how much it showed up in Japan that they got access to Bakshi and that they were influenced or not. I haven't seen that much conversation, but I do seriously wonder.
I'll tell you, I also noticed with Wizards how much the Dark Crystal and Labyrinth were a response to Wizards.
Yeah.
Like, particularly, so with the Dark Crystal, like, honestly, Henson just cribbed whole characters, but like, oh, but I want them a little like this instead. I made them into felt puppets. Like, I swear to you, that is what happened. Okay? Was, okay, cool idea, but what about this? And, like, it's kind of interesting. Like, it's definitely more homage. It's not like Henson was trying to steal. That's not what I'm trying to imply.
No.
But more of so strongly inspired to essentially have a response Hence, the Dark Crystal takes place 1,000 years after a terrible schism and essentially a whole heck of a lot of climate change. And Labyrinth takes place after presumably a nuclear apocalypse in the Goblin world. And that is why Jared's hair is falling.
And then there's also what's it called? The Ghibli, one of the first ones, A Wind Called Amnesia, I think. Is the rest of it? I can't remember what the word title, what the first word or two is for it. But also makes a lot more sense once you've seen Wizards of, oh, this is, another one that was inspired, that seems to be inspired by, or at least was
okay, so are you talking about Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Which, yes, is a post-apocalyptic story as well. And specifically about climate change apocalypse, and then war as well. So again, like, I actually thought Wizards was interesting.
Once you get past the
incredibly calm and relaxing voiceover. Anyway. But
she had her name removed from the credits.
She had her name removed.
And then she got so much voiceover work from this one she had herself removed from.
Yes.
That she felt guilty forever afterwards.
So, but I think like this is essentially, it's animation talking about after war or after some sort of apocalypse, like a really bad apocalypse. What remains, okay, is artifacts of our society. And you see that influence then in Studio Ghibli and in Henson films. You see this echo of it, of they are also going, you know what? Good point. Let's set these in these post-apocalyptic worlds where maybe because of nuclear radiation magic is real now. Like, why not? But I see where essentially people were inspired, and also they saw it as a way to have conversations about this of, hey, it would be really great if we didn't blow ourselves up, y'all.
Wouldn't
it would be so awesome. So I see so much now, having watched pretty much his whole back catalog, with just a few exceptions. With some of his short films, I didn't get a chance to watch. But you know what? That'll be for the next time we discuss Bakshi, because I also didn't get to watch the Mighty Mouse cartoons. And I actually remember those from my childhood. I didn't get to watch too many of them as a kid, but I remember those. And it's like, we will talk about Bakshi television the next time. So there will be a part 2 one day.
Then we can also talk about the Dr. Seuss cartoon, the Butter Battle.
I did watch the Butter Battle, because I mean, I watched it as a kid, and of course I'm going to watch it. And I remember the
book. Another one about, nuclear disarmament and, let's not destroy ourselves.
Well, I mean, honestly, even Christmas in Tattertown was trying to talk about like consumerism and what happens to all the things we throw away. And that, sometimes they have a second life. And what, that can be good or bad. It was kind of, but also it had this Christmas in Tattertown had a little bit of a post-apocalyptic feel to it too, which is kind of wild. So again, I didn't realize it was Bakshi who started these conversations. I mean, even He-Man is supposed to be post-apocalyptic.
Yeah. But like, if you want to see how much there's like direct cribbing and ones you just would not expect from other people to be influenced, talking about the one Ralph Bakshi did with the musician family, American Pop, which, oh god, I will talk about some faults with Bakshi in the next hour.
But we
in the
saw
meantime,
Spielberg and Don Bluth totally crib the opening to American Pop for American Tail.
Yeah, an American Tail with Feifel and Feifel's hat, and in Russia, all of that was done, 4 years earlier in American Pop. Like almost scene for scene. Like, I kind of wonder, does American Tail take place in the same town as American Pop?
Oh, you
And
know
these
it.
are the mice?
Well, they show the humans that they rotoscoped
Yeah.
for the opening scene in American Tail. Well, the second scene anyway. So yes, I believe that they were making a tip of the hat of, oh yeah, this is where we got it.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, like American Pop, he has the Feifel hat
He does. He has
the
it's
entire,
the same
for
color.
quite a while.
It's the same everything. I mean, like, I'm not going to say American Tail is not super cute. Okay, look, but essentially, in
It is
many
its own
ways,
story.
it is his own story. But in many ways, it really did feel like, let's do American Pop, but for children. Sure, why not? I mean, it is super cute. Like, I mean, look, I grew up on American Tail. Okay,
Yeah.
I had a Feifel doll. Okay, so my heart will always be there. But to see Bakshi's and go, Steven Spielberg just flat out stole. Like, hey, no one will notice because we're going to make a mice instead.
Let alone at kids.
Thief. Now, which is not to say I did not enjoy where American Tail then went. I loved it. I loved it as a kid. I still love it. It's just one of these of, oh, is this what inspired Spielberg with American Tail and Don Bluth with American Tail? Okay, I get it more.
Yeah. But yeah, it's Bakshi. To watch Bakshi is to understand the basis for so much art that came afterwards.
Yeah, so much visual media. And even like I definitely see Coonskin and its influence on quote unquote black exploitation films in the latter half of the 70s, but also the I don't know what they're called, not black exploitation, just I guess, oh, what do they call them? Oh wait, there is a word. Hold on.
Urban.
The urban films of the 80s. Of course, with a nod to Townsend.
Yeah. I mean, he is a great director.
No notes. Although we should, you know what? Now that I say that, we should
You're
do
right.
one
We
of
really
his
should
work.
talk about
We
Robert
really,
Townsend
yeah, we
as
really should.
director.
Yeah.
Because again,
Remind
someone else was
me,
trying to get out that experience that's not just,
as well as we know
powerful white
Townsend.
America.
We know Townsend influenced a lot of filmmakers and
Yes.
storytellers, as well as, like, let's be honest, we watched his movies as kids, so he influenced us.
Yeah.
We should definitely, for the 8th season of Creative Recharge, talk about him
But
during
yeah,
this
like
the break. Remind me to write it down for ideas for the 8th
I
season.
will. But yeah, like speaking of Coonskin, it reminds me a lot of Sweetback's Badass Song,
Yes.
in that it is definitely lumped in because of it was, came out in the early 70s, and it
Mhm.
is, a for the most part black and African American cast of, oh, it's black exploitation, except it's not. It is about the African American experience at the time, dealing with America, with the U.S. Um, that they lived in,
Mhm.
and the difficulties, and the way Coonskin did it is by taking the trope of the Uncle Remus stories,
Well, as
and
well as Song of the South, they were trying
so
to reference, and I
yeah.
mean, like, and I really feel like Coonskin, in a low key way, kind of brought a resurgence of interest in the Uncle Remus tales, and also their African origin tales, the
Hmm.
story, as well, which I'm very glad for. Um, because this is, again, part of our society.
But also showing how you can take these children's stories and rework them to discuss adult, you know older, just, older adults problems in society, and how and what they face, and how you deal with them, and the good and the bad. and they use it to essentially tell the story of why these two guys, played by Barry White and Scatman Crothers, two amazing singers that I'd never really heard of having an acting career.
Right. Yes, I too did not hear much about their acting career. But that might have partly been because we were just young, okay? I
Yeah.
mean, we were not participants in the 70s, so we did not
Yeah.
know.
But of why these people are willing to break the law and
Mhm.
why they are, they're willing to rescue someone out of, break them out of jail, that
Yes.
they are willing to kill people for them, of,
Mhm.
by showing with through these cartoon stories the world they live in, and so the realities they face, and how, Miss America, the personification of America, is, antagonistic and, um what do you call it when,
Definitely two-faced.
huh?
Definitely. Definitely two-faced.
Two-faced, but also that, what do you call somebody that mercurial emotions? They're something of where you never know when they're going to turn on you,
Yes, there is a word, and suddenly I cannot remember it.
and how, these characters trying to make it think, oh, I finally found an in with Miss America, and then she just turns on them on a dime and
Or
kills them.
rather spreads her legs and shoots them
Yeah.
from her
Yeah,
closet.
wow, some visuals that are hard to
Yes, yes.
forget.
All right. Can we just, like we're kind of getting to the first break. Can
Hmm.
I just real quick talk about what I love about Bakshi films in specifically the 70s is there's always party titties. There's always breasts that refuse to be held in by clothing. They
And they're
escape.
not salacious.
No, I would not say that they are salacious, but they
They no,
are.
they are the true epitome of a party titty. They are
Yeah, they're
just
just
out
out
there
there
to
for a
have a
good
good
time.
time.
They just refuse to be held back,
Yeah.
held in. And it just warms the cockles of my heart that this is what I could depend on from Bakshi is party titties. And I love it because you know what? If you've ever partied in real life, then you know that at a certain point, titties start kind of breaking out and then getting stuffed back into clothes. And they keep coming back out. And it's just, yes, that's what it's like to party. Is party titties got to get some air. And I just found it such a joyful, kind of effervescent little, like, I feel like, okay, that is the true hallmark of a Bakshi film. Like when he is able to do precisely what he wants, in his
Hmm.
independent filmmaking, is you're gonna find some secret party titty. That's his little signature. And I am not sad about this. I love it. That it's just like, I mean, honestly, even in American Pop, at one point, Tom and I paused the film, like, is that a party titty? Hold up, let me pause it and get up close to TV. That is in fact a party titty has escaped in this scene. There's just a woman in the background who's got one titty out, and she just sitting there, like just having the time, like it's nothing big. And I love it. I love it. It just makes me so happy.
But yeah, like I was surprised to see though how much. I mean, but it also just shows the one of the things that's not discussed of much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we occasionally bring up, but most don't, and we're starting to see, a reversal. Is that our mother, who was Jewish, went to school her entire life as a person of color. She
Yeah.
graduated as a person of color. She
Yes.
went to
A lot
college.
of young people, and maybe not so young people, do not realize that various seemingly white groups of people did not become white in America until a later date than they might have realized. So, like the Irish were not white until when did the Irish become white? The 1930s,
Yeah,
20s or
yeah, it
30s,
was
something like
the late 1920s, early 1930s, as part of the Supreme Court decision that
that. Yes,
being
right,
Aryan does not make you white.
right. So, because like I think it has
Western
something to do
European
with
does.
Like the Irish became cops, and they were not allowed to be cops until after this ruling. And is at that point that the Irish start becoming whites, because maybe most people have seen those signs that said no, what is it? No blacks, no dogs, no Irish.
Yeah.
The Irish were not white, where they were not considered white for quite a long time. And so then the Irish became white in the 20s and 30s. Okay, so they're definitely white by the 40s. But Jews and Italians were not white. And Middle Eastern, Arabs were not white. Okay. Our mother, being Jewish, was not white. And Jews, Italians, and a select amount of Middle Easterners, specifically like Lebanese/Syrian, Jordanians, Turks. But again, not everybody, just some Arab or Arab-speaking folk became white. And Mom talked about how she graduated in 61, 62, somewhere in there.
Something like that, yeah.
And that she was not white. People on the street would yell things at her if she was waiting for her school bus. And she did not become white, and she was not treated as white. She said she started noticing it in the late 60s, where she started being treated a bit less suspiciously. But it did not, it was over a period of 20 years that, she said she talked about how more and more she was treated white until she and Dad moved to the South, where once again she was not white.
But Bakshi as well grew up in this, and so yes, to bring up Maggie, what is Maggie pointed out, there was a lot of backlash against Bakshi, saying he was racist and sexist. Essentially they were almost canceled before canceling was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because when these movies came out, Jewish was white, but he had spent his entire life. Bakshi was born in the 30s.
Yeah,
being a person of color, always, so he was, he lived with everyone else of color, which is why in his stories you will always see a lot of Italians, you will see Jews, you will see a lot of black people, because that's who he grew up with.
Yeah, because they all lived in the same tenements.
And why you will always see in his stories that Italian is fine, the mafia are evil.
Yeah, I think really a hallmark, especially of Bakshi's 70s and early 80s films, is there's two evils in Bakshi films: the mafia and heroin. And those are the two evils. There's lesser evils, like Fritz the Cat being a poser. Oh yeah, that's bad. But not like just pure evil the way he saw the mafia.
Mm-hmm.
And also heroin. The drug dealing.
That's what he grew up around experiencing. But yes, they were just like, oh, this is a white, the 70s, they were like, oh, this is a white guy talking about, making these commentaries about black people. And it's like, what are you talking about? He thought he was making commentary about his own people.
Mm-hmm.
This is the people he grew up with. These was the cultures he grew up with and experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And said, I can definitely see where people would lump in coonskin as a blaxploitation, except these are the experiences they were actually having.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of violence. Yeah, we do actually have a black character early on kill a cop when they get stopped. Mm-hmm. But we see in the stories why of these mm-hmm. cartoons because they've already learned that given a chance, they mean nothing to the people in power.
Wow, you don't see cops using brass knuckles often in film, do you?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sure that was happening in real life.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's important. So, I think it's important to understand the context that Bakshi is coming from, to understand the context of the films he's making, and that his experience is not what it would appear necessarily on the surface. I mean, he was born in Palestine in the 30s. He was not white. He never thought of himself that way. And understandably, because Mom, like me growing up in the 80s and particularly by the 90s, Mom was becoming white even in Mississippi. And because Dad was definitely considered white, we were mostly considered white or mixed in Mississippi. But
Other
more
than in
mixed.
summer when I would tan and everyone
Yeah.
thought I was against
Yeah.
somebody of
So
color, and
Tom
all these
was considered
problems.
more mixed, and I was just as pale as the driven snow. Um,
Hmm.
so I mean, yeah, people thought that I was not my mother's daughter, which is like, until they saw us together and saw we deserve each other. But anyway, but Mom used to talk about she did not think of herself as white. When she would hear somebody like when she would overhear somebody in a store, like a cashier,
Hmm.
say, I hate that they get, we only need white customer. They'd say other thing. I'm not going to repeat it because it's gross. It's terrible things. I'm not going to repeat it here, but it was North Mississippi, super racist. And, and I'm hearing it too, because I'm in the store with her and she hears it. She's like, freeze up. She's like, we got to leave. I'm like, why? Because it's the 90s. It's the early to mid 90s. She's like, they said they don't want people, non-white people here. And I'm like, excuse me, ma'am. Daddy made very clear I'm white. And she's like, well, I'm going to sit in the car and you buy whatever you want.
Yeah, to say she would send you through, especially if it was times when we were on food stamps.
Yeah.
For you to go through and pay,
Mm-hmm.
she wouldn't get as much
I
fuss and
literally,
trouble.
I once saw her use, this is back when the food stamps in the 80s were the tickets, I once saw a cashier spit on my mother when she was buying discount bread, old day old bread. I once saw a cashier spit on my mother. And after that, she would have me go in and buy it. She would put in what the cart, and then she would go sit in the car while I would go purchase it.
And the other part,
Because she knew I wouldn't take if somebody spit on me. I would. Somebody, like, I once had a cashier say some shit, and I told that lady, you can leave if you don't like working for the public, because you don't seem like you were meant for real or retail. And then I would go speak to the manager about, you have the trashiest cashier who doesn't need to be working with the public. And if I see her in here again, I'm going to run her out myself. And the manager was like, I will speak to her. And then all the black ladies behind me were like, you go, girl. Good job. And I was like, just because I'm on food stamp doesn't mean that I belong in a dumpster. And if you can't hire better help, then maybe we don't need to give you our business. And the manager's like, ma'am, I will speak to her. And if you ever have another problem with her, she will not be here. And I was like, good job. I was such an uppity Karen when I was a teenager.
you were really good at it. And the other part I also want to bring
But
up,
it was because I knew that she was so mean.
Yeah, but it also brings up the other part that I wanted to mention real quick before we go to break, so about being sexist. There is this confusion I see throughout. Like, this is just people in general. This is a problem people have noticing, is there is a huge difference between a misogynistic story in film and misogynistic characters in a story or film. And actually, yes, always in all of his stories, especially the ones that are contemporary, has misogynistic characters in his stories. But
But
his
it is not
protagonists don't take it.
it is not misogynistic or sexist to acknowledge that violence against women exists. It is misogynistic and sexist for you to write female characters who just accept the violence as their due.
Yeah.
Therein lies the difference. I have no issue with Bakshi showing violence against women, because guess what? That actually happens, okay? It's terrible. But with the characters he writes, the female characters, they do not take that shit. They deal with it, but they also do not just stay taking abuse, okay? They change their life, they pivot around, but they don't take that shit. And that is what I appreciate about Bakshi. I do not consider him sexist at all, because
Because he
he
shows the real
writes strong
experiences.
female characters.
Yeah, these are the experiences people really are having, and this is what he wants to comment and bring a discussion about.
Yeah. Maggie says there was a lot of feminists who had more problems with what his female characters wore than what they went through. Exactly. Like, I think a woman should be allowed to wear whatever she freaking wants. And if that means that she's got a party titty out, so be it. You know what? I'm happy to see the party titties.
I mean, the only one that we give credence to, and it's why Glory says Frazetta is such a bad influence,
Yes.
is Princess Tigra in Fire and Ice.
Oh my
What is
God.
up
How
with
many
that
times?
character?
This woman is such a oh, if only she could just not keep getting kidnapped.
She's supposed
Fight
to be
for
studying
yourself,
magic,
girl.
and she never does magic a single time.
Like the chain around her waist is so loose. Even in the film, she could just step through it. There, she's trying to break the chain with a dagger, and she's not even twisting it to actually break the chain. She's trying to like saw a dagger like a moron. Not okay. It's fine. It's fine. You know what? It's fine. It's fine
But
because we're gonna.
that's for next hour.
Yes. What are we gonna talk about next hour, Tom?
Next hour, per usual, we are going to talk about the problems and where we see how to avoid them for other people. Of here's the stuff to learn from that,
Yeah, like why
there are ways
didn't
around.
actually quite ever like he's such a visionary. He's so talented. Why didn't he ever quite get off the ground and really get the notoriety he frankly has always deserved? And we have some thoughts on that. That Me, 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 me. Me, 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 me. Me, 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 me. Well, hello, hello. We are back for the second hour of talking
Back
about
again.
Bakshi and
Oh, Bakshi.
writers. Like what writers can learn from Bakshi and be inspired by Bakshi, and also maybe from the things that did not work for Bakshi.
Oh, yeah, like, because if there's one thing we really noted is another hallmark, and not such a great hallmark of Bakshi, is that while the stories are all in visionary, they are all, truly a new type of way of telling the story.
Oh yeah.
They are very creative and interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Bakshi definitely never found an editor who understood his storytelling style to help him streamline um, the story. It will always drag in parts because it is one of the difficulties of being creative is it's hard to know for your audience who has not experienced this over and over and over again like you have
Mm-hmm.
for the first time what is going to emotionally resonate and what is going to be confusing and so also drag and not be of that much interest till a different point if it ever is really going to be an interest because they don't know the backstory like you will know as a creator. Of Bakshi definitely needed an editor to
Slash storyboard
yeah,
editor. Like, because like a lot of animation is actually edited in the storyboard phase rather than in the actual, like live action
in
film
post.
editing. Yeah. I don't care which, it's still editing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if what I heard about Bakshi that he doesn't really like storyboarding that much. He likes to just do what you feel kind of or like essentially sounds like a pantser animator. And again, pantsing is a valid way to creatively tell stories. However, that if you're pantsing it, that means you also definitely need to, if anything, plan to edit more and longer, to do more editing phases at various points.
Afterwards. But we've got ads again.
Yeah, I know.
Um, but yeah, like you truly need to edit later because like that's what we were talking about to each other is how one of the differences between Bakshi and not really getting as known versus more modern director storytellers like Wes Anderson and Quentin Tarantino
Mm-hmm.
is both of them have editors and writers who know what their story they're trying to get across
Mm-hmm.
and what will work for the audience to help them hone it into a entertaining product
Mm-hmm.
that you don't need to know any of the backstory that you don't
Mm-hmm.
need to know what's going to happen later on in the story to make this of importance
Mm-hmm.
that it's always there and immediate and the audience is always there with you and you never lose them versus Bakshi definitely had a problem of sometimes losing the audience for either needing for exposition
Mm-hmm.
for later on to make sense or because he didn't actually understand the emotional beats that were going on and how to keep that pace steady and not
Mm-hmm.
realizing that for new watchers this is going to drag.
Yeah.
So it's a but yeah, like one of the things you can do is yes,
Essentially, he needed more people on his team that he was working consistently with.
yes. Like Quentin Tarantino would not be nearly as well known if he didn't have Sally.
Mm-hmm.
And he has said this to anyone who ever asks, and sometimes when
Mm-hmm.
they don't, he will bring up and he makes sure all of his staff when they're making the movies know how much Sally is as important as anyone, including Quentin, to to the movie that will be made. And yeah, Bakshi did not develop a team to work with. Of like, so yes, as a writer, you
Yeah.
need to find editors.
Sally Menke.
Yes.
She passed away in 2010.
Um,
Does explain a lot about his later films.
yeah, it does. Of you do need to find the people, even if you're not paying for editors, you need to find people that you can get good advice from, who enjoy reading your alphas, and helping you do story development with, and pointing out what's an outsider would view, and giving you good feedback instead of just going, I like it or I don't like it. Giving you information that you can work with
Mm-hmm.
to keep your audience. And because what's the point of a great story that makes a lot of great points if no one ever finishes it?
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things we definitely saw in American Pop, of where yes, he is telling this multi-generational story
Right.
before The Godfather, but
No, I
from
mean
well, you're
it.
right. It was right after the first one.
No,
Sure,
American
produce
Pop
it.
came out in '81, and The Godfather came out in the early '70s, and
Oh,
it was
that's right. Yeah.
like I'm like, excuse me, sir.
Oh,
Yes, it was produced by the same guy who produced The Godfather, but Albert Reddy. But The Godfather came out nearly a decade before.
that's right. I had it backwards. But of but it drags because he's trying to tell so many stories, and he doesn't have levity in there. He doesn't give you moments of happiness as much to keep you entertained and to keep the emotional roller coaster moving. There is some little bits of happiness and of interest and change, but there's not nearly enough. And so it does end up feeling like just this marathon run through all of these lives, and this fascinating way of looking at the lives of the last century, and how culture has changed as well as the music.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he didn't have a creative team
I think
that
he
would
could have
have really
benefited
helped.
more. He would have received more feedback. So one of the things, yeah, I agree. I saw as a problem for Bakshi was pacing,
Hmm.
which, from what I understand in animation, that is dealt with during the storyboarding phase. And if you don't closely storyboard, you're going to get stories that kind of drag or meander, wander around. When I looked it up about, what's that one? Adventure Time. And like, it has been brought up several times of why some episodes drag. It's only like 10 minutes. How is the animation dragging? And the reply has been several times from various showrunners of, if you don't closely storyboard it, it just sort of, animation just wanders around and it doesn't quite get anywhere.
Yeah.
And so again, like, storyboarding is so important to a lot of films, because aren't the Marvel films most closely
Oh yeah.
storyboarded?
Yeah, they call it previs because it's now using 3D environments
Mm-hmm.
to do it. But yeah, it's all of it is, especially all the action stuff, is entirely done before the director is not involved in the action scenes.
So what I see is like how this can benefit writers is, number one, you can in fact storyboard your story, even if you're not doing a visual story. You're just writing print. I really do see that in many ways, storyboarding, particularly action scenes, can be very beneficial. And I pose that to writers that, have you considered storyboarding some or part of your story? Also, that it is important as creatives that we establish working teams with people who essentially we frequently work with together. Whether we're talking about editors or alpha and beta readers or all of the above. As creatives, you really no man is an island. And it is so important to establish working relationships where you know how the other person works, you know their expectations, they know yours, and you really collaborate. I realize that not everybody wants to hear that, and that there's many an introvert that's like, but it is important, and you can collaborate without having to talk to them much, I promise. But getting feedback is our friend, and getting feedback from various people that you get feedback often, like you have certain beta readers and I love this particular style or genre that you write, but you don't always write that. That's fine. But whenever you are writing in that genre, you're gonna like contact your good old alpha and beta readers that love that, and that when they give you feedback about, I kept getting confused about the color of the outfits, that okay, I know they pay attention to this. I do need to give it a little bit more prose or
Or
something.
that I'm getting confused between these two characters because the names and their descriptions are similar.
Mm-hmm.
I need more
Oh,
distinguishing.
yes, I found it very confusing. So one of the characters, I think, in Fire and Ice is Dark Wolf, and one of the characters in Wizards is Black Wolf.
Yes.
And that is so confusing. I'm like, wait. And it took me a while to realize they are not the same.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, Wolf, it's Wolf, it's dark. And it was very confusing. And also, in Wizards, I'm like, there is no mention of wolves existing. Where did they know about wolves? What did they think Dark Wolf or Black Wolf means? And like, I really feel that if he had had several people reading over his script, somebody could have mentioned that of, are there wolves in this world? Are you going to have wolves show up? Like, why name wolf? What is the significance of this? Is there a significance?
But
In
also,
stories, everything needs to be for a reason, or else you're running the risk of the reader feeling like they have been led astray or that you've misled them. And you certainly do not want to lose the trust of readers. So it's the Chekhov's gun. If there's a character named Dark Wolf, where are the wolves? Do they like befriend wolves? Are they like a lone wolf? Do they
well, I
behave
mean,
wolf-like?
in Fire and Ice, he is literally wearing a wolf uh pelt.
Yeah, I'm just saying, in Wizards, it's like I never saw any wolves.
Yeah.
Why is it called Black Wolf? Does it mean something different now that, the world has ended and they're just finding these vestiges of a projector, a Nazi projector? Also, so there's big fairies and little fairies? I'm confused. And I really feel like this is because it was not workshopped enough. So there's supposedly human fairies, but then there's little tiny belligerent fairies? Did everybody just sprout wings? What happened? I'm confused.
Be again of the places where if you don't have backstory, all of a sudden what you're getting in these scenes is very different.
Tom, they may have had backstory, but she talks for 20 freaking minutes. I just droned her out at a certain point. Like, I didn't mean to, but she just kept the
But
voiceover
again,
kept
and
talking.
again, that's something else that's brought up in teams of, and as everyone brings up a lot, is that you can't have that much exposition.
Like, okay, I'm just saying, Wizards, it's 20 minutes practically of like exposition city. Why? Why? And why did you like, this is like taking the idea of the Star Wars opening scroll and going, hey, you know what? If 2 minutes was good, 20 minutes would be great. And no.
And that is the problem of like, yeah, you cannot have a story that requires that much exposition. You need to just explain it through scenes and actions by the characters.
It really seemed like in Wizards, he did not know the trick of, you can have a minute or two of exposition, of just a voiceover, but then you really do have to get into it. Like, honestly, it's a bit of a problem with Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings, too. All right.
Yeah.
And the first one, like, where she just keeps talking. And thankfully, the visuals are pretty good. But let me be perfectly, brutally honest. And I'm having trouble falling asleep. I play the director's cut of Fellowship of the Ring because it's like 10 minutes of her narrating, and it usually lulls me. And so I got to be honest, for like the last year or two, Frodo has never made it out of the Shire before I'm unconscious. It's great. It's better than Ambien. It's like, go on, Galadriel, tell me how the elves are so wonderful, whatever. And how, like, the one thing he never thought is that if somebody cuts the ring off his finger, that he'll explode. Okay. Sure, why not? Like, what is this, like? He's under pressure? What is... It doesn't matter, Tom, because I'm asleep, because the voiceover lasted too long. And again, that is the problem with prologue. That is the problem with too much narration before the action starts. You can bring the narrator back. And it's like, did Bakshi know you can bring the narrator back? Because the narrator shows up about, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through Wizards. And she starts narrating again, but very little, which I do not mind. I don't find it too relaxing, like sleepy relaxing.
I mean, and you see, like, what a better version is what happens in The Dark Crystal, where we have a narrator, or we have the equivalent with Bagra of these exposition, dump scenes, but they are not too long, and they are spread throughout, so you don't have time to take a quick nap.
It's just so relaxing.
And you see that in writing, where you just have
it's just
exposition for 5-10 pages.
When a story is just 5 pages of gray print, and there's no conversations, and there's no action. It's just like you imagine a narrator, it's Galadriel all over again. She's just talking for 10 minutes. It's like, oh no, I'm not gonna make it. You've got to break it up. Like, yeah. I realize this is controversial, but I'm going to say it. Okay. I frankly think a full page of narration is too much. Even if the narrator is still going to narrate, there needs to be like conversations cutting in, and also some action. We need to very quickly, on the first page is how I would say it, very quickly get into introduce me to someone. And they better be an important person. Don't introduce me to somebody that, 20 pages in, I'll never see again for 300 pages. Like, don't mislead me like that. That's rude. But, like, show me one of the main characters. It doesn't have to be our protagonist. They can lead into it, but you got to give me someone important. I got to start following them and seeing how they're interacting with their environment, whatever. And then you can keep narrating. And then eventually, hopefully, that character will eventually meet the narrator. Will like come upon them, and they're like, "Oh, somebody, you're not my quest. Oh, can I come with you? I don't know. Are you going to keep narrating?" Anyway, whatever.
That person that plays the guitar at the parties.
However, I say that, and it's not that you can't do any narration. It's just you got to get to some action or a conversation, one or the other, preferably both, pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Also, another thing about Wizards, since I did make it through the narration and eventually watched the film, is okay. Again, another criticism. I hate that one of the main wizards called Avatar. Like, okay, whatever. Is that because he's the avatar for Ralph Bakshi? I'm really confused. But anyway, I think he is. I think it's like it should have been called self-insert. Um, but then he starts narrating parts of it,
Mm-hmm.
which that's not confusing at all.
Yeah. But yeah, like this is where having a team that you can trust their discussion points with you really comes in handy and helps give you a much better product.
Mm-hmm.
You know, versus I mean, one thing I will say that I do appreciate Ralph Bakshi for, as we said at the beginning, is Ralph Bakshi does not hold himself, you know, in a rarefied position. Ralph just wanted to, you know, make these stories and get them out there, and he did. He succeeded,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what makes him happy is just to know they are out there and they are still of interest, and he got the conversation started.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, someone who never could. Now, was he like this at the beginning? I don't know, but it's definitely a good thing to take from him is that part where once you make a product, it's not a reflection of you how other people interpret the product. It is, you know, how people interpret that product, what they bring from their own experiences trying to interpret what was made. Hence, you know, Neil Gaiman as well going, you can write whatever fan fiction you want for the characters he's made, but he's not going to just offhand agree with you, oh yeah, that's totally what would happen, because he knows to him who those characters are in his universe and how they would, but that other people have different interpretations of them, that's fine, that's great. Do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all, you know, interpret it and take it in personally and then sort of bring back the product, you know, bring out what was created in us through, you know, that entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I do like that of like, yeah, he does not, you know, hold it as sacred text. They have a job. They have a job of entertaining. They have a job of bringing up conversation, but it is not holy writ.
I
And I
think
like that.
I love that Bakshi is definitely open to a variety of styles of storytelling, and that he definitely has more than once, more than twice, told stories based on what he saw around him and not just on his childhood Disney. But just like the stories surrounding him and his life. Uh, I really like that about Ralph Bakshi. I like how, and it's something that you and I talked about when we watched Heavy Traffic, of this movie came out in what, 72, 73,
I think so, yeah.
and it is just as topical and relevant today as it was when it was made.
Mm-hmm.
And we were just floored that here it was a movie we were watching that was made before either of us were born. And this is absolutely fresh and current.
If there's one we would recommend people go watch just to see how we've come back to the same conversation pieces, that this isn't anything new, and here's how they saw it before, definitely recommend Heavy Traffic. Of it is surprisingly relevant.
Mm-hmm.
it shows why we fight for these rights and why we will always fight for them, because they're needed and necessary to live in a productive society.
Mm-hmm.
And there will always be those who try to take that away. Oh, kitty. Another one I did want to
Not
bring
my
up.
inner David's tab. Well, it is if you count.
And one, I'm kind of sad that Maggie's not here anymore, because I did want to discuss while she was here, but she's not. But she had brought up is, I think, why Maggie might have had some problems when she originally saw Fritz the cat.
Mm-hmm.
Fritz the cat suffers from the satire problem, which
Well, it
is,
suffers from a bunch of problems.
yes,
And one of them is, why is there two different characters named Winston that look identical to me?
there's that. But it's this. So it is making a commentary about the middle class
Mm-hmm.
of the 60s, of the late 60s, of how, you know, they want to do love-ins, and they want, they want so much change. But what it's showing through action is that all of these middle class, college kids are all talk and no actual change. They
Oh,
never want to be
yeah.
uncomfortable. And
Like,
why? And we see that with all of their interactions with the crows that are very explicitly laid out as, Black people. And why they don't trust all the other animals in Fritz the cat, because they talk at them, they talk around them, they objectify them, but they do not interact with them as just another person.
right. Not a single time did any of the cats invite the crows over to their house. Or, and no time when we go to any character's house, any of the cats, do we see any crows just hanging out. It's very telling. Hello, I'm not talking about you as a cat.
But if you realize that it is actually an indictment of the middle class at the time in America,
Mm-hmm.
and the people who were just coming into power, then it makes a lot more sense. Versus if you think of it just because the protagonist is this, like, the whole point is the protagonist is not someone you like. They are not someone admirable.
He's a
They
poser.
are
He's
just
a
like
scammer.
Seinfeld, and they are just like Always Sunny in Philadelphia, I think.
Yes.
Of you should not emulate anything these characters do.
Mm-hmm.
These are the bad characters. These are the characters that bring those around them down. Even though we are seeing it as from their perspective, they always make sure to show in these that these people bring about the downfall of others and themselves. It is not a coincidence or accident. It is their own fault. Fritz causes all of these problems for so many people, especially crows.
Mm-hmm.
Even when
Oh,
the
yeah.
crows like him are trying to help, he just causes more trouble.
Yes, he starts a riot.
He doesn't suffer for it either.
Mm-mm.
And so, like, hence it's an indictment of all of the problems that people of color in society face
Mm-hmm.
from the middle class. That for all the talk of how, they too want change and they want a better world, they ain't gonna do anything that makes them uncomfortable or puts them at risk for their comfort. And so, if anything, they are more trouble than they are worth, and you need to keep your distance and never trust a thing they say. Because Fritz will say anything to get something he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And, doesn't care about the consequences as long as they don't affect him. And if they could, then he's going to skedaddle real quick and leave someone else holding the bag.
Yep.
And, to say how much this is a commentary and says such fascinating things.
Oh, it is acerbic.
All the cops are pigs. And
Right.
we see very directly scenes where one of the pigs is Jewish, so he himself is Trafe. But we never see any other Jewish characters who are pigs. Only the cops who are Jewish are pigs. Which means when you become a cop, you become a pig.
Yes.
And to show of essentially his commentary of these cops are not helping their people. They are a danger to their own people.
Mm-hmm. When you become a cop, you become a pig. And you are Trafe. But you are also in no way benefiting your own people.
Like, that's the level of commentary, and
it's really fascinating. I was very fascinated by that it was still topical all these years later. Like, I mean, it's very different from the 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat.
Yeah.
And you could tell Bakshi was not involved in that. And Kitty, she's knocked the mannequin down.
Oh.
Because you moved the clothes to where she likes to get to go up to the thing. Anyway.
Couldn't rest for any longer.
No. Because you didn't. Anyway. Cat's gonna chaos.
Yeah. But yeah, of all of these movies raise great commentaries on the society they are written about.
Mm-hmm.
And they are fascinating discussion points. And they tell so much story. And another thing we can definitely say that every writer should study Bakshi for is Bakshi can do character development in a sentence or two. In just what
I was very impressed with even in Heavy Traffic and Coonskin, in so many of them, there is excellent character development.
And it doesn't take a lot of time.
It was, that I thought character development needed, a fair amount of conversation or minutes to develop. I mean, seriously, I'm just going to say it. Marvel really needs to study Bakshi on how to do character development. I said it, okay? Like, I was watching Screen Crush talk about Secret Invasion. Took them to the library.
Yeah.
Read them for filth.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and one of the real criticisms they had about Secret Invasion is the abject lack of any character development for any character, including Fury. Also, the wife we've never heard of before, but now, and then why would she get character development? That would be weird. And Gaia, why would we give Emilia Clarke's character development? We're going to give that other villain, he gets character development. Great. I can't remember his name. He's one of the lizard shapeshifters. Yeah, Skrulls. Oh, I couldn't remember. It's like, lizard shapeshifter.
Yeah. But Bakshi shows that it doesn't take much time at all. It's just a comment or two that shows their priorities and their wants, and so much about them in so few words. And that part I really do admire about Bakshi in all of his movies, is you learn so much about characters so fast in such a short time. It doesn't take much at all. So, like, if you're worried about it distracting you from the plot of the story, Bakshi shows character development does not have to in any way distract or take up any real time.
Mm-mm.
But you have to know where to put it in and how to phrase it.
I am frankly in awe of Bakshi's character development in his movies, particularly from the 70s. I am honestly planning to rewatch several of the films, particularly Heavy Traffic and Coonskin. I know, Tom, you did win me over, because I was like, oh, I don't want to watch Coonskin, and Tom's like, you gotta try. And but I mean, like, also Tom didn't tell me, oh, it's the Brer Rabbit stories. I grew up with that. And I was like, I would, although I did not care for, they did not do a good retelling of the Tar Baby story.
Yeah,
They
no.
had a decent kind of tip of the hat to the Briar Patch story. And they did actually a decent little kind of urbanization of the Briar Patch story, which I did like. But I was disappointed with the Tar Baby one.
Mm.
And there's so much more commentary to make about the Tar Baby story in a modern setting.
Mm. Yeah.
Particularly when the people you think are your friends or at least your community are not your allies. There's a lot to be said. So, uh, but I do plan to rewatch Heavy Traffic and Coonskin
Hmm.
and possibly even Wizards, honestly, now that I've gotten through the 20-minute voice.
Now that you know that you can just skip the first 20 minutes
Or
and
at
get
least
to the
the
story.
first 10, 15 of a minute,
Yeah.
that because the character development is so good so quickly. And I want to study that further.
Yeah. I mean, you can kind of say, like, you also see that a lot in American pop, but it just drags. It is a hard slop. Like, American pop definitely would have been better as 5 or 6 20-minute
Mm-hmm.
episodes
Yes.
instead of being a movie. It is definitely one that would have been better as a miniseries.
Oh, Tom, also just there's some scenes where nobody's talking. And it's
Yeah.
just silence and they're just all looking pensive. And I'm like, what is happening here?
Trying to give the scene gravitas, Gloria.
Like they're rotoscoped, so they don't have, you can't read their expressions.
Like, I mean, American pop, you can definitely tell that there was some inspiration from Coppola
Yeah.
and The Godfather of trying to give a similar weight to the characters,
Mm-hmm.
but it's harder to do in animation, especially with the rotoscope, especially with, although American pop definitely shows what Bakshi wanted to do with Lord of the Rings
Mm-hmm.
and simply was not given the time or the budget to accomplish.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, versus Coonskin and Heavy Traffic and Wizards really show the kind of storytelling Bakshi was best at.
Can I go ahead and just say that Peter Jackson just full cloth stole from Bakshi's Lord of the Rings? Literally stole
Oh yeah,
shots, shot for shot. Now that is not to say that I do not appreciate Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings series. Much better ring race. Okay, like there is no doubt. Why Bakshi? Why are they like zombies in cloaks? It's weird. It's so weird. But Peter Jackson was like, "Ha, I see what you've done, and I'm going to do it with a bigger budget and better CGI." Which, okay, but no credit to Bakshi, sir. No, that's not okay. He should have at least hired Bakshi as a consultant, so like give homage and also say, "So, how did you want to do the second half of this?"
because I mean, and we know how much it was influenced by that Peter Jackson was influenced because we have literal quotes from him about the hobbits and how the hobbits moved from that one
Mm-hmm.
that Billy Boyd worked on
Mm-hmm.
and wasn't credited. Of how, we know the cartoon's heavily influenced Peter Jackson's look and a lot of the scenes. But yeah, it was a little weird.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if you want to know, but if there's one thing we can absolutely always recommend and study um, Ralph Bakshi for, it's how do you do character development in only a sentence or two.
So the other thing I want to talk about is Cool World. I love it and hate it. I think Ralph Bakshi's original idea of making an adult animated / live action horror film of humans in Toontown would have been freaking awesome.
Yeah.
That is not what was made.
And there were definitely a lot of people on there fighting his vision of it.
It's definitely got kind of a too many cooks, spoil the broth kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it is a terrible film, even though I do think Kim Basinger definitely deserved the Razzie Award for worst performance.
Yeah.
My God,
I mean, Gabriel Byrne definitely did his best.
Oh, he did a pretty good job, and I definitely think Brad Pitt was hired for Interview with a Vampire based on his portrayal in Cool World. Because he's just doing a version of that for Louis. It's weird. But, all right. Okay. So, kudos. I feel though that like Cool World, again, I know that essentially Bakshi got undermined a lot. And one of the ways you tell is, number one, there are no party titties. So disappointed. There's no happy breasts. Just out there living their best life, unbound. And number two, this film needed more exposition. This film needed an explanation of like cartoons and human
Well,
world.
like they would have explanations, but it would be at the wrong points for you to remember it later, because there was not much direct visual reference between them, so it was hard to keep track of that, and it seemed like just throwaway lines.
Yes.
Like it was just, oh, the editing was just, what in the world?
Also, let me just say this, just to get it off my chest. And again, I know this is not Ralph Bakshi's fault, or at least I don't think it's Ralph Bakshi's fault. As a child of the 80s, I really liked that Aha music video, Take Me On. And in no way did they reenact that. And I am still salty about this. I want it. Like, okay, so Kim Basinger and even Gabriel Byrne and also, what's his name? Brad Pitt. They are all turning human to cartoon, cartoon to human. Okay. And in no way is anyone banging against hallway walls. And I'm disappointed. I'm not okay. Where's the music playing? It's the 90s. It's the early 90s. Where was the music? Like the 80s. There's two things. There's Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and then there's the Aha music video, Take Me On. David Bowie does a song for Cool World, and nobody is showing the human fighting being turned into an animation and the suffering, and then they are animated, and then they got to get back, and nobody's even thrown into a trash can. Disappointed.
Yeah.
Again, I am going to tell myself that is not Ralph Bakshi's fault. I'm going to tell myself it's the producer's fault, Frank Mancuso Jr. But it was right there, Tom. It's there the whole time, and they never take it off the plate. I just want this thing. I mean, you know what would be really great is if David Bowie had been like, now Holly's, pulling him and he's like, no, maybe he's the first one, like, and he's like, no, and so then she's trying Gabriel Byrne's character. That would be cool.
I mean, it's definitely in the same song style as the Labyrinth.
Yes.
Music of David Bowie.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just truly I feel David Bowie's song was definitely just entirely wasted on this movie.
I don't think they even played it till the credits.
Yeah. I'm like, truly, what is this, an afterthought? And why didn't they even like try to work it in?
Why are you wasting good David Bowie? Hell, there's a lot of them. There's what is it? Thrill Kill Cult or whatever?
Yeah.
They wasted it. They got a bunch of their songs, and I'm like, this is like really good stuff. And they're not even, but maybe that is Ralph Bakshi, because I know Ralph Bakshi is rather against, having his animation labeled as musicals. But it's not a bad thing.
Although he's not against doing animating musical pieces.
Yeah, because I saw the Rolling Stone one that he did for the Rolling Stone music video he did for them, Harlem Shake.
Yeah, Harlem Shake.
And yeah, like obviously, and he's a good director. I don't know what happened.
But yeah, like you can just tell, like, no, they did not want Bakshi for what he was actually good at. They wanted him because he was one of the few people they could hire who actually knew how to mix humans with animated scenes together.
Versus what is he really great at? He's great at character development. He is great at visionary stories and, frankly, visionary animation. And then they try their best to squelch all that. That is wild. So I think ultimately, try your best as a creative not to work with people who don't really want you to be a creative. That's what I take away from it. And you know what? Be careful of the contracts you sign so that if you need to, you can just bail. Get you and your little visionary butt out of there. Get better contracts.
And that's part of what having a team also helps with.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we know Wes Anderson's like, no, I don't do a movie unless I get my team as well hired.
Yes.
We all have to do it together or I'm not doing this.
Right.
We see a similar thing from Tarantino of, if I don't get to work with these people behind the scenes, I don't want to make it because I can't make what I'm good at.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where Bakshi's just training so many people to go off to do their own careers backfired a little, where, we see his influence on everything.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely everything visually.
Yes.
Including Batman, the Batman movies of the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
You will see after Cool World, the Batman and Robin movie definitely took a lot of notes from Cool World.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't have that team so they could all be together. And, as we now see, everyone's stronger in a union than we are individual.
So set up your teams. It is important. Then they'll help you advocate. Yeah, they'll help you advocate for your vision. They will also help troubleshoot your vision and workshop it so that there aren't plot holes, there aren't things that people say it was just right there and you never took it off the plate, Because yes, I want to see, like, David Bowie has passed away, but gosh, you know what I would love to have seen David Bowie like resist turning into a cartoon? No, no. I refuse to be part. You cannot have my penis, Holly. Like,
I mean, essentially the counterpart to his character in The Labyrinth is Jared.
Yes, I know, because that bulge.
Yeah.
For a children's movie, Tom. That is
quite
one of the rough parts. Huh?
Yeah, that was one of the rough parts. It's just like, what is going on here?
Quite an impressive bulge in a children's movie.
And apparently, by all accounts, they did try their best. It's just...
They don't apparently have crotch minimizers like they do breast minimizer bras. And, well, they do. They do, because drag queens use them.
Yeah, there weren't any real drag queens working on set
to teach David Bowie how to tuck it
in. Yes.
I'm fine. I'm totally fine. David Bowie just may have been part of my sexual awakening as a child. It's totally fine.
I mean, it's why nobody questions why Imam, is still a decade later and deeply in love.
I don't think it's because of his crotch, Tom.
No, but I don't think it hurt. Probably. Did you not see her interview at the house?
Yes, I saw. I'm the one who sent it to you.
Yeah. No, there's definitely some fond memories.
But that's romance, Tom. It's different.
Yeah. I know my baby. She
She
definitely loves
genuinely
him
loved
dearly.
him, and he loved her. Like, and they had a love child.
Yes. But yeah, like I know they really missed out on a David Bowie music video for that. Like that would have helped so much.
Again, listen to your beta readers.
But yeah, there's just I was just so surprised in the end though, now that I'm a little bit older and I have a little bit more context of seeing just how much influence his style and his storytelling has had on animation in general.
Yes.
Like this is what they studied and they cribbed notes from for so many other story movies and TV shows and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Which is
It's
why,
pretty
we
impressive.
definitely recommend everyone go check it out. There's a lot to learn from it.
Mm-hmm. So, Tom, do you have final thoughts, or have you said your piece?
I think I mostly said it because it's like you will, while it can be a little bit of a slog depending on the movie to get through Ralph Bakshi's, we definitely recommend most go check out Bakshi of the 70s when he had more pull and people were more willing to fund his vision
Mm-hmm.
and see what he created, because him at his own creative in charge is his best work, of where he could make all of the choices and decisions. He has great vision and he has great ideas of how to tell a story, and we could all still learn from him because so much of his stories are still currently, you know, valid
Valid.
commentaries on society. We're still dealing with
Mm-hmm.
the same things 50 years later.
Yep. Tis true. Tis true.
It is more timeless than you would expect,
Yes.
given how of the time it was.
Yes. I agree. I agree 100%. I think I would say the same thing. Watch Bakshi's films. Just about all of them are worth watching at least once in your life. I'm going to say that.
Yes.
If you can get through Fire and Ice. I'm sorry, at a certain point, girl, stop getting kidnapped. Like, put up a fight, something. I don't know. Get a brain. I don't know. She's so horny. Like, she's met Larn, and like literally within, I guess, an hour, they're already cuddling. What the hell? All right, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the ones where
Like,
Bakshi teams up
girl.
with others to create are not as good. So like Fire and Ice is not as good as the others. Same with Cool World, of where you see other people's
Yeah.
influence. They don't always understand what he's trying to do, and so you get conflicting messages in the stories.
Yeah. But they're all worth watching once, maybe
Yes.
multiple times. I mean, honestly, look, he did Lord of the Rings before Peter Jackson. It's definitely worth watching once to see what got Peter Jackson so inspired and going, I'm going to show him I can do it better with CGI, make New Zealand a technology hub. Like, whatever. Like, see the film that inspired Peter Jackson for decades, and really led Peter Jackson to keep exploring technology to realize essentially Bakshi walked so Peter Jackson could run, kind of deal.
It also inspired Ghibli because
Yeah.
Ghibli and Miyazaki's team and everyone worked on animating those
Yes.
movies.
So again, watch any Bakshi film you can get a hold of. Notice, particularly in the ones that he did not collaborate with other like in someone else's world, like so Heavy Traffic, Coonskin, even Wizards. Really notice his character development. Also notice the Ralph Bakshi signature party titty. Enjoy. Look, I'm just saying. It's just breasts. They're just there. They're not hurting anybody. Nobody's ashamed. Nobody's scolding them. They're just out there living their best life, having a good time, getting some fresh air. Because you got to air them party titties. And, enjoy. And see what you think. Let us know yourself. We absolutely would love to hear your thoughts on this. Just going to throw it out there. Especially if you are watching this on YouTube later. Be sure to tell us what you think in the comments, in the chat, and for the premiere. Be sure to share, like, subscribe, the things, ring the bell. I don't know, all the stuff. We love it when you do. But definitely tell us what you think. We want to hear about it. Now, what to expect on next week's show. So this is for August 21st, Monday show. We're going to talk about Henry Selick films. Specifically, Nightmare Before Christmas, James the Giant Peach, Coraline, Monkey Bone, Wendell and Wild. So if you're looking for homework, what a great time to already go ahead and watch this, because that's what we're going to be doing this week. We can't wait to see you next time. We hope you will be sure to join us. And again, remember, you can see us on YouTube. Glory Writes the Blues. Mondays, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so glad that you're here. And we will see you next week. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.